Amazingly, they run in 64 kilobytes, which is the thing today is like, how you can have a computer with 64 kilobytes? The university was like a sacred land for the police, but at the end they entered and they took many people. There were some economical measures that were good under Pinochet. The problem is that at the same time there were more than 2,000 people that disappeared. And so what is the human cost? And also in developing countries, you learn how to improvise very well. So something that in a developed country they cannot do, like improvising. So I was the second generation of PhDs in Chile. My generation was had like 6-7 people that went out for PhDs, and we came back. So basically, suddenly, the number doubled. I forgot to renew my student visa, and then suddenly I was illegal in Canada.
Welcome to the Immigrant Computer Scientists podcast, where we talk to computer scientists who immigrated from their home countries for study or for work or for other reasons. In these oral history interviews, you will find established and renowned computer scientists from across academia and industry narrating their experiences of immigrating from where they grew up to a completely different land, often the US. My name is Indy Gupta, and I'm your host. This is episode 35, an interview with Ricardo Baeza-Yates, who has straddled academia and industry for many decades. And he has lived and worked in many countries across South America, Europe, Asia, and of late North America. Ricardo Baeza-Yates led some of the first research labs in Europe that were founded by Yahoo in the early 2000s. In this episode, you will hear, in Ricardo's own words, the story of how he survived a debilitating illness as a child, how Ricardo survived the brutal dictatorship of Pinochet in Chile, the country where he grew up, the story of him appearing on a TV quiz show as a child, of doing 4 technical degrees in college simultaneously while also supporting a family, of pushing himself to the limits, and a rather humorous story of seeking asylum in North America. This is the story of Ricardo Baeza-Yates. As usual, you can find all episodes and detailed episode guides on our website, csimmigrant.org. Again, that's csimmigrant.org. And you can find us and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and basically wherever you get your podcasts. This episode is structured into acts or chapters. You'll find chapter markers on your audio player, and you can use these to jump between the acts or chapters. I'm delighted to welcome Ricardo Baeza-Yates to the Immigrant Computer Scientists podcast. Ricardo Baeza-Yates holds many positions simultaneously. He's a research professor, part-time but nearly full-time, at the Institute for Experiential AI in Northeastern University in the Silicon Valley campus, where he has been since 2021. He splits his time between Silicon Valley, California, as well as other parts of the world where he serves as consultant for startups and companies, including in Brazil, in Chile, which is his home country, we'll talk about that, as well as Mexico, Spain, and the US. And Ricardo also consults for the United Nations and the Inter-American Development Bank. Ricardo also holds part-time professor positions at the Universitat Pompeu Fabra in Barcelona, Spain, and the Universidad de Chile, Santiago, Chile, where he also did some of his studies. Ricardo is also on the board and a member of many different organizations focused on AI and computing in Europe, North America, and South America. And not only is Ricardo an immigrant, his career is also an embodiment of the immigrant lifestyle as he's traveled around from different parts of the world, including having spent time in Europe as well. Ricardo has won many awards for his scholarship and work and contributions, including becoming an ACM Fellow in 2009, an IEEE Fellow in 2011, and in 2012 he won for the second edition of his book called Modern Information Retrieval, the Best Information Science Book Award from the Association for Information Science and Technology. Ricardo also has won many awards for his contributions to Latin America and Chile, including in 2009 the CLEI distinction to achievements in informatics given by the Latin American Association of CS Departments, and in 2010 the National Award of the Chilean Association of Engineers. Ricardo is also a founding member of the Chilean Academy of Engineering, which was formed in 2010. Now here is Ricardo Baeza-Yates' immigration story in chronological order. He was born in the early 1960s in Santiago, Chile, and he grew up there, spending his childhood in the 1960s and 1970s. Then in the late 1970s, early 1980s, he went to Universidad de Chile to do his bachelor's, originally in engineering, but then also in electrical engineering and computer science. He did 4 degrees at the same time. In 83, he got a bachelor's in computer science, and then from 83 to 86, he did multiple degrees simultaneously, a Master of Engineering in Electrical Engineering, Master of Science in Computer Science, and the Electrical Engineering specialization. In 1986, after he finished his degrees, he moved from Chile to Canada to do his PhD at the University of Waterloo, which he finished in a record 3 years. In 1989, he finished his PhD at the University of Waterloo. And then he returned in 1989 to Chile to resume his professor position at the Universidad de Chile in Santiago. From 85 to 2004, before he went to Canada and also afterwards, Ricardo was a professor at the Universidad de Chile. In 1994, he became the youngest ever full professor at that university, and he continues to be part-time at the university since 2004. In 2005, Ricardo moved to industry, becoming the vice president of research at Yahoo, hired to manage many of Yahoo's new worldwide labs. From 2005 to 2014, Ricardo was based in Barcelona, in Spain, and he supervised the Yahoo labs in London from its inception 2012 until about 2015. He also supervised the Yahoo labs in Haifa, Israel, from its inception 2008 and until around 2012. And he also managed the Yahoo labs in Santiago and San Francisco. In 2016, Ricardo became CTO of Intent, a semantic search company. And since 2014, he has been based in Silicon Valley, California, USA, and he holds a part-time research professor position at Northeastern University. Welcome, Ricardo Baeza-Yates, to the Immigrant Computer Scientist podcast, and thank you for being willing to share your journey and your story and your experiences with us.
Thank you, Indy, for the invitation. I'm delighted to be here.
So let's start near the beginning. You were born in the early 1960s in Santiago, Chile, and you went to middle and high school in that city. What are some of your early childhood memories?
Usually I don't talk too much about my childhood memories, but I think that if we're talking about being an immigrant, I think it's important what happened in your early life to set the stage for this story. So I guess the first important memory is that my father left when I was 4 years old, so I was very young, and I had 3 younger sisters. So from that time, I lived with 4 women. I think that makes a big difference. And of course, I had to do my share of the home stuff. So that was the first thing that was important. I didn't see much my father, maybe once a month. And when I was 8 years old, I didn't see him for a long time. That happened after I finished my PhD. Also, when I was in 5th grade, I think was because of my sister got it first at school, but the doctor didn't take care well of my case. I got tuberculosis. So I had some shades in my lungs, and I had to be around 6 months in bed and 2 years treatment. So because of that, I couldn't go to school. And then I had to basically pass grade by doing exams that were free, taken in the Ministry of Education. So I was not really a good student, but I had very good memory. Or maybe I was a good student because I passed these 2 years of basically 5th grade and I would say maybe sixth grade and 7th grade. I passed it as a free student, so I was not formally in school for those 2 years because of this illness. And then I went to a high school and I was a student that was okay, but it was not really the top. But I started to have better grades on high school.
That is a lot of adversity very early on in your life. Do you feel like you had a supporting environment at home with your mother and your sisters, or did you become independent very early on in life?
Yes, I think I had a lot of support that my mother had to work from the beginning because of my father leaving. Something very important is that my grandfather also like a depression, and he taught me to read and write. I was his first grandchildren, and basically I think that marked me because before going to school I already knew how to read and write, so that was an advantage. And he used a dictionary to teach me, like a classical, or it's called Larousse. I don't know if it's a French dictionary, that at the beginning is just a dictionary, but the second part is more like an encyclopedia, like a small one. And I think I like that part because it had maps, it had photos of animals and so on. So, for example, from that time, geography started to be my hobby, and I'm a geography geek. So I know many things that most people don't know because of my grandfather. But sadly, he died in an accident when I was 9 years old. So that was another adversity in the sense that my grandmother, which was, I guess, the support of all the family at the time, my maternal grandmother, she had to work too, like my mother. So and so basically, all the people that were supporting me until 9 years old were more busy. But then a lot of aunts came to the rescue because my mother had 4 sisters, younger sisters, that help on that. For example, with my youngest aunt, we have only 11 years of difference. And then it's this like big family, more like it's very interesting because it's more like I would say this family that when they gather, they can gather 100 people, and I have like 33 cousins from my mother's side and so on, and of course more and more grand nieces and nephews and so on. So it was tough. But at the same time, there was a family that really had a lot of support. So I have good memories about that. Really, it looks worse than it is really.
Yeah. This is the Immigrant Computer Scientist podcast interview with Ricardo Baeza-Yates, faculty at Northeastern University, startup founder, and prominent industrialist. Of course, you had a little bit of a disadvantage because you were not able to go to school for a couple of years because of your illness. Would you say that your interest in science and math was very clear early on in life, or did it just grow over time because you were good in a lot of things, you were interested in a lot of things?
I think my interest because of my grandfather, who I mentioned, and also because when I was at school, I was in a very small English school, and the director of the school died just before I think I entered the school, and then his wife, instead of going back to England because they was British, decided to stay at school and run the school of his husband. But she was not a teacher. But then she wanted to be a teacher, and she said, "What is I will teach a course," and she invented the amazing course that was called General Knowledge. So in every class, I had a completely different thing, like a Greek mythology in one class, history in another class, and every class every week was kind of opening the world. So I will say that because of my grandfather and this teacher, Winifred was her name, Winifred, I was more like a renaissance this time. So you wanted to know everything because every time I was having a new thing that was very interesting. So really, I liked everything, and because of my illness, I read a lot. So the only thing I could do in bed, we didn't have enough money to have more than one TV, so the TV was not in my I couldn't have a TV. Only had a radio and books. So basically, I either had to listen to music or reading, and so I started reading a lot. So I started to love science fiction. So maybe there comes the science with science fiction. So I read all of Asimov, all of Bradbury, all of Ursula Le Guin, etc. So all the famous, and luckily people brought me books to read, and I read a lot of things, all the classics on, of course, like pirates, either Salgari, for example. I don't know, many people don't know Salgari, but he had this, he never traveled, he was Italian, but he never traveled, but he invented this pirate in Indonesia and this other pirate in the Caribbean. And the stories were nice, and again, because I like maps, I was following the stories in the maps.
That's a very interesting series of classes to study in school, kind of like a random walk through general knowledge with your.
Well, it was amazing. I think it should be a course everywhere, because it's like a random walk on interesting things, right?
Yeah. And I think keeping the curiosity engaged is, I think, the important thing there.
Exactly that. They basically, if I had all the potential to be a researcher, I think I started there because I was curious then from the start. And you need to be curious to be a researcher.
Yeah. It's a marked difference from the way in which curriculums are structured nowadays, not just in school but also in universities, because they're usually very rigidly structured. You study this and then that and then the following thing after that. This feeling of being adventurous and being curious from the very get-go, that I think is very clear in your very early schooling in your school.
I think a last story there here in the last year of high school, because I knew so much geography. So, for example, you could ask me anything about a country, I will know it. Political aunt, so basically the sister of the wife of one of my uncles, almost forced me to go to try it for a TV contest. And I was very shy. So when I was 17, I was very shy. But I did it, and I classified. And I classified for a program that was basically a knowledge program. So basically 9 people started after, if you classified, you had 9 people, everyone with his or her own topic. And basically in every program, one person was eliminated depending on how many questions you failed. My topic was political geography of Asia and Oceania. So basically, I couldn't use America and Europe because that was too simple, too easy, so it had to be something far away. There were another person that was doing geography of Africa at that time, and there were people doing literature, music. By the way, all the people were like more than 30, so all they were after school. So I was the only teenager there.
You were the youngest?
The youngest, but competing with people that was double my age at that time. And I went to the before last program, so I was the last 3. I think the jury was not very happy about me because I had corrected them a few times, twice, and I think they did like that a teenager corrected them, but they were wrong. So they asked me like a question I will never forget. They asked me what was the antipode of Santiago de Chile.
Yeah.
That was a problem because Santiago is a physical geography, and also because Santiago de Chile is not in Asia. But they asked me in which province of China was that. And then I complained, and they said, no, you are Chilean, you need to know that. But still, knowing the physical position of all the provinces of China was not part of my topic, but I was 17, I said, okay, I will try to answer. I failed by like 100 kilometers. I said just the province of the south of that. Now we'll never forget the answer. The answer is Xi'an, the terracotta soldier city. And essentially with Xi'an, it's almost like Santiago. so it's easy to associate. But because of that, there was like a lot of criticism in the news. Like say, okay, you with the youngest one, you basically eliminated him with a question that was not on the topic. So like people said there was discrimination and so on. So at the end, it was so bad press that the sponsor of the program gave to me like as a special prize 2 tickets to Europe for a month, all paid. And that was my first large trip, and then loving geography, that opened more my mind, because when I was 17 years old, I traveled in all Europe. At that time, it was very expensive to travel, at least in Chile.
Yeah.
And also, thanks to that money, I could pay the first 2 years of my university too.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I could help my mother.
So that's a very early experience of being in the news in a sense, right? Because people are talking about you on TV and on the newspaper. And you mentioned earlier that you're a shy, introverted person. How did you react to that?
Yeah, people would recognize me in the street, and I was like, maybe I will flash, and I don't know how to react. For example, in the program, I took my glasses out so I didn't see well the people, because seeing the people, I would get nervous. And years later, one of my sisters gave me as a gift for my birthday 3 programs that he got. And it's very interesting to see you at 17 years old in black and I think it was in color. And basically, I would go many times like this thinking the question because I didn't want to see anything and get concentrated.
Covering your eyes. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny because the last program when I was eliminated, almost all my high school class was there. By chance, the school was just neighbors of the TV channel. So had my family and my high school class there. And it's interesting to see even my grandmother and my mother there in the last program. So yeah, have good memories of that.
I want to ask a little bit about languages. You mentioned French, and of course, Chile, people speak Spanish. What languages did you learn while growing up at that young age?
So because I was in this English school, I learned English. Not very well, but I could read it. So speaking was harder, much harder. Uh, by the way, this general knowledge class was in English. So you had to ask questions in English, and the teacher will not answer you if it was not in English. Of course, she spoke Spanish too, but one condition was this class in English, but still, I think that was good to learn English because you wanted to understand this amazing content she was presenting. So that helped. And in Chile also, in high school you learn French too. You learn 4 years of French, but it's basic French. But in my case, I had a very good friend which had a French mother. So I was listening to French also when I was much younger, and I understand a lot of French, but still speaking it is harder. So later I learned English very well, and also learned Portuguese, and also learned to understand Catalan. So, but all this early mixture of languages was helpful too.
Yeah. What about programming languages? When did you learn your first programming language?
The first year of university. I never seen a computer before going to university, and at that time I didn't see it. So because we're talking about 1979, so there were only mainframes. There were no screens, so you couldn't really use it. So you had to write the program in a special paper where someone will type it and run it, maybe using cards, I don't know. I never saw it, but I learned basically a kind of, I think I learned Wat5. My first programming language, Wat5 was a structured Fortran from a company that by chance it came from Waterloo, that was Watt. So that's the coincidence, but it's interesting that later I will learn that. I think that the company was called Watcom and had all this. Wat5 was a Waterloo Fortran 5. And I have an interesting story about there because I love it. So I love the logic there, and I was doing very well. I was scoring 100 until in the third exam, the professor called 2 students and said, "You are cheating. You copy each other." I said, "Can you show me the program?" And at first glance, they look the same, but I said they are completely different. But why the teacher thought we were cheating is because we were the only ones. We had to put these labels for the go-tos. So we had to use go-tos. We were the only ones that maybe were thinking on how many labels we need, and then we had the labels in order. Because typically people will need another label, and then we had to put a completely different number that was not in order. But we were the only two that had like 10, 20, 30, 40, like, and he even didn't check. I said, this is so weird that they must be cheating. But basically the program was completely different, and said, oh, I apologize. I never realized that the student of first year would think about how many labels you will need and then have it in perfect order. So we were two good students that did the same. Yeah. And then I think the third year I finally was able to punch cards. So I was punching my own cards. I remember once that I tripped and I had all the cards in the ground. Yeah. So after that I numbered the cards. So just in case it's easy to put back them in order. Otherwise it was a mess. I had like 1 hour putting them in order, the program. And I think I just, maybe the fourth year, I finally were able to use a terminal. And in my first year of university, I think finally the first PCs arrived, and they were with CPM, not with DOS. The first one was CPM, this operating system before DOS. And amazingly, they ran in 64 kilobytes. Which is the thing today is like how you can have a computer with 64 kilobytes.
That's very
but things were well done at that time. Today we abuse of resources.
Yeah. So when you got into university in the late 1970s, 79, I think you said.
Yeah, 79.
So in Chile, from what I understand, you need to apply to engineering in general without choosing your major, and then you choose your major. Can you describe how your interest in electrical engineering and then computer science grew?
I entered to the engineering common years. There were 2 years that were common. Thinking, well, originally I wanted to be astronomer, but someone told me that you need to be very good to have a job. Although in Chile we have the advantage, we have it's one of the 2 main places for observatories in the world because of clear skies of the Atacama Desert. So the largest observatory is in Chile, and the largest radio telescope is also in Chile. But then I think I said, okay, I will do electrical engineering because that was the hardest one. So electrical engineering was the most difficult one. I was not really a top student the first year, but then I started to like computer science, but computer science was not an engineering, and I wanted to be engineer. So then I decided to keep going doing electrical engineering, but at the same time doing the bachelor in computer science. And for that I need to take a double amount of classes. So normally I took 10 classes instead of 5, which was the normal. And I did reasonably well, but because I was doing so many classes, because of that, I don't know what was the system they were using, I became the top student of the engineering faculty. Not because of the grades, because of taking too many units. And I think I realized that I wanted to find my limits. So I also started to take some physics classes. I think in fourth year, I went up to 12 classes, and I passed all of them. And wow. I said, that's enough. I think I have found my limits. I can do a lot of multitasking. So the good thing about that is I learned how to do many things at the same time. I had classes that basically were at the same time. I had exams at the same time, so I had to choose one and then do the remedial exam and so on. And even sometimes I didn't remember the exam, and some friend said, we are in exam, and a friend told me that story years later, that basically I was 30 minutes late to the exam. I ended earlier than him. I didn't study, and I got a better grade. Because if I got to classes, I would understand everything. I had a very, very good memory until recently, and I abused of that. So I think it was very good to at that time, because then bachelor was 4 years, engineering was 6 years. So what I did the other 2 years, because I thought I could do 2 things at the same time, so I did the master in computer science. So when I finished electrical engineering, and I had another master, and then while waiting, I had to wait some time to go to do my PhD. I did the last master in the last year. So So that's why I did 2 masters and 2 careers in some sense.
You were trying to find your limits by taking more classes. Was that just a challenge to yourself, or were you trying to accomplish something, or what
I
was
think
driving
was
you?
I think was a challenge to myself. I think there was part of my being so shy that I said you are insecure of yourself, and then you say how I can show myself that really doesn't make any sense to be insecure. So I learned to not be shy, but I think I know myself. I'm still shy, but I have trained my software to be so social, and people will say today maybe they will not believe that I'm shy. I was shy. During this time also I married. I married very young. I had a kid when I was
This is during your college years.
yes, I had my first son when I was in the third year of the 6 years. In the third year, I had one kid. So also that was basically I had to also to be teaching assistant of many courses in addition to the other courses I was taking, also to pay the university and sustain my family. So basically I paid partly with this work, and also I asked for a credit to the government, and then I paid the credit right away when I could. So thanks to the government, thanks to this TV program, and thanks to these teaching assistantships, and I was able to pay my university.
That's very unusual, even for today's day and age, to have a family and to have a kid while doing the bachelor's.
Yes.
How easy or hard was it juggling all those things, all the 12 courses you're taking in a year, plus the family and a kid?
Many people ask me that, and I have a motto that Nike stole to me is just do it, don't think about it, because if you think about it, then you lose time. You're already behind. So I just knew what I had to do next. So I had because my memory, I said, okay, what is the next thing I need to focus on? This is the most urgent thing. Do that, and then I think about the next one to do. So I never thought about next week. I had friends that were always thinking, oh, we have 5 exams this week. I said, well, I have like 10, but if I start thinking about that, I will be much worse. So I was doing what is next. So I was like first come first serve, and I was managing, and I think it was very good because I learned how to do multitasking and how to be able to, for example, to be members of many committees. So like how to manage a lot of things simultaneously. So that was part of my exercise also while in this challenge to find my limits, was also how to do many things. I think it taught me a lot about myself.
Yeah. Now, your classmates in the electrical engineering and computer science programs in Chile, what fraction of them would you say were women versus men back then?
Not too many. In engineering, maybe it was 20%, but in electrical engineering was even less. So these were the toughest classes. For example, my tough class was electromagnetism, and we were like maybe 40 people. Only 3 approved, and one of them was the second time he was taking the course. It was not normal. The people were trying to fail people, and many people left. And I think for women that was very hard a lot of stress. I was lucky that I could understand the teacher and then remember everything. So I never had to study too much because my memory was really good. I still have good memory for all things, but not so good for new things.
You're listening to the interview with Ricardo Baeza-Yates, faculty at Northeastern University, startup founder, and prominent industrialist. This is the Immigrant Computer Scientist podcast. So you have actually experienced Chile through several decades of upheaval and democracy eventually, since before the Pinochet dictatorship, through all the years of the Pinochet dictatorship, and then under the new constitution. So I want to talk to you a little bit about that. So when you were in kindergarten and middle school in the late 1960s and early 70s, Chile had a democratically elected government and had that for many, many decades. And then in 1973, when you were like nearly a teenager, there were inconclusive. You were 12, yes. So there were inconclusive elections, and then there was a coup d'état where President Salvador Allende was overthrown by the military junta. What was your memory of that 1973 coup and the political events back then?
So this was the year where I still was at home because of my illness. So the second year was not at home, but I was a free student, but I was going to my old English school to learn because they didn't have the 7th degree, but this director I mentioned, Winifred, would take me and help me study like as a free student, but I would go to this school. And then what I remember very clearly is that after the coup, basically there was a curfew where for the rest of the year, let's say all 1973, there was no school.
Wow.
So I had to study at home. Wow. And then I remember the later years where, like, for example, when I was 17, 18, I had my first girlfriends, and I could walk back to home at midnight, very safe because no cars were always in the street, and you knew that even walking in the darkness was safe because the military was basically everywhere. And I was a teenager, I guess, was thinking that I was not in trouble because I was a teenager. So, but yes, it's a very, very strange time. I remember the time of Allende where there were things that were missing, like they were not easy to buy, and partly because the economical power did that. But then at university, basically, I saw the political part, and I realized that most people were against the Pinochet, and me too. Luckily, I was never taken prisoner by the police because many of my schoolmates had that problem. Like basically, the university was like a sacred land for the police. But at the end they entered and they took many people. So
I see. So secret in the sense that they wouldn't touch it in the beginning, but then later when they saw that there were protesters, they would.
Yeah, basically in the democratic history of Chile, the police never entered university. It was like not a law, but basically common understanding that it's like going inside the church. So it's like the church of knowledge. You shouldn't enter. But at the end they did, and because it was easy to protest from behind the walls of the university, thinking that you were safe, but after that you were not safe.
Yeah.
So, for example, at that time in this history, I have been very lucky in many ways. At that time, was compulsory to do the military service, and of course, none of us wanted to do military service.
Right.
But if you were a student, you could basically push it to the future. And every year you had to do a procedure to say, I'm still studying, so I cannot do the military service. And one year I forgot to do this. I was very lucky that I think the same morning that I had to be present in an army ground, I think it was the same political aunt that convinced me to go to the TV program, said, I saw your name in the list. Do you know? I said, no, I don't know. I bought the newspaper. I got the newspaper that was old. I saw my name, and I see that I had to be at 9 a.m. in this place. Yeah. And of course, it was already like 10 a.m. I ran to this place, still like a bit hippie because I was a student of protesting student. So I went to like a hippie clothing and so on to be there. And I get to the place, and of course the place is already closed, and said, "You're too late." And I begged to the guard there. I have a family. I have a kid. Please let me in. And after a lot of begging, the guard said, "Okay, I will let you in, but no, this started at 9, so you're too late. You will be called to the military service." So I ran to where all the people were, and they were like 2 hours in the sun, like standing. And when I come, the person in charge says, "What are you doing here?" I want to say something like, "Shut up, go here." And he puts me in the first place of the line. And I was lucky that like 15 minutes later, they started to process the people. They were standing 2 hours, and I was late, and I was the first one to be processed. And of course, I came with with my marriage certificate to say, okay, I cannot go do the military service because I have a family. And I tried to show that, said, no, first the health exam, we can worry about that later. And then I have flat feet, and also I need to use short-sighted. So after that said, no, we have too many people now. You are dismissed because of health issues. So I was lucky, and otherwise I would be like a deserter because I was not there. So, and in Pinochet time, I don't know how bad that was. So I was very lucky at that time.
How often was this? Every year you needed to go in and get this?
Yeah, every year. I think this was, I would say this the fourth year I forgot to do it. And after that I was dismissed. So in some sense it was good because I didn't have to do it any longer.
Yeah. So your mom was working when you were a child. Did your mom's life and career, did you see that change after the 1973 events?
No, because she was luckily working for the Catholic University, which was like a right-wing university and supported Pinochet. So, but for example, because my mother never divorced, because there was no divorce in Chile, and she was one of the first librarians of the country. But because of that, because of not be like separated, but not official divorce, she could never go to be the director of all the libraries, and she was always in the second place because of this. Because it was an unwritten rule of if you don't fulfill all the Catholic commandments, you cannot be like a managerial position. But she did almost all the jobs. She was always like the vice director of the libraries of the library system of the university. But I studied in the public university, the one that is non-religious.
So that's interesting. So there was a kind of a discriminatory rule against those who did not satisfy all the norms of the Catholic Church. For instance, you don't have your.
This is unwritten. No one will ever recognize that. But I have heard many cases of similar things, like it will be very hard to be a professor if you are Catholic and you didn't fulfill. But even if you are, say, Jewish and you didn't fulfill the commandments of your religion, so it's like if you are not religious enough, you cannot reach certain positions. This is a university that depends directly from the Archbishop of Santiago. So it belongs to the church.
You mentioned that some of your friends were arrested or taken away by the army. Was that because they were involved in political activities, or was it just the government overreaching?
No, it was because we were protesting at some points. For example, the biggest one was just before I left for my PhD. Something that was also never done is that basically the president of the university was chosen democratically. But Pinochet realized that they had to change that. So appointed the president, and was a general, of course it was a military, appointed the president of the university, and there were a lot of complaints. But then it realized that was not enough, and then also appointed the dean of engineering. And that was too much. The dean was always chosen by the faculty. And then at that time there were a lot of protests, and for example, that was the time that we did like a standing on the university for every day. We would go to the place of the university inside and stand there with a sign saying the dean has to leave because the dean was not chosen. And then the police entered because they had to enter because we were inside, and the dean was also inside, right?
Right.
So the dean was not a military, but was a person that was appointed by this government. So at that time, many people were in these protests. Many people were arrested, and if you were a professor, it was harder to be arrested. But sometimes some of us, I was very young professor when I was doing my second master, was already professor, and some people like my SMH were already professor, and they were taken by the police, and then another professor will say, well, these are professors, and they will not believe that like a 22, 23-year-old person was a professor. So I remember that two friends were taken basically in a bus, and then another professor was very brave and rescued them and convinced the police that that they were really professors, although one of them was not really, but was the husband of the professor. So we wanted to get them back.
I see.
But many times, some schoolmate will stay one night or 2 nights in police and then free. Luckily, because many other people were never free.
Now, during your bachelor's years in 1982, there was also a monetary crisis and a lot of people were disappearing. How did that affect your life and your mom's life and your family's life? Because you already had a kid by then.
Were tough years. We were not affected too much with that. We were like a lower middle class family. At least we had the support of this family, of my family. So yeah, I think were tough years, but I guess one way to get away is that I had so many things to do, and at least that was a way to escape. Like you had to pass all these courses, you have to take care of your family. I participated a little bit on the protest, but not as much as other friends, because they were some people full time in political activism. I was only a small percentage of my time.
Fast forwarding a little bit, we'll come back to your years in Waterloo, but fast forwarding a little bit to 1989, after you've gone back and then the Pinochet dictatorship ends, the new constitution comes in. Did you see life change after that event?
So I came back just before the referendum that kicked Pinochet out. I couldn't vote because you had to be registered before. The constitution was new, but was written by Pinochet. So the current constitution still was written by Pinochet and has things like that, like Franco did also in Spain.
Yeah.
For example, to change the main parts of the constitution, you need 2/3 of the parliament. And having 2/3 of the parliament, you need to have a lot of voters.
Yeah.
And that's why 1 year ago, Chile voted to have a new constitution. And that was a landslide. It was 78% to 20% in favor of the new constitution. And now we are writing a new constitution that will be, maybe next year will be another referendum with the current government that is now, it's a change from right to left. I think this constitution at least is written by the people. I think that's the main value. People want to have a constitution that is was not written under the dictatorship, even if it's the same. I think it's like a principle.
Yeah. What about the support for computing and tech? Did you see that? How was it during the Pinochet years, and then how has that changed? The government support for tech in universities and in computing in general. How was that during the Pinochet years, and then afterwards in the post-Pinochet years?
So the most well-known research funding program that started under Pinochet started on 1981, and they're still going on. And I say that has been increasing, but I think that there were some economical measures that were good under Pinochet. The problem is that at the same time there were more than 2,000 people that disappeared, and so what is the human cost of anything that was well done? Because the Chicago, it's called the Chicago Boys, basically were all economists from Chicago, and that basically they did like a hyper capitalism. So a lot of industry went bankrupt. Other industry did well because they could compete, and then we had this 82. We had this crisis. So I think in some sense, a strength the industry in Chile in some sense, but at a very high cost in human rights. So this was a trade-off at that time. And after that, I think the good thing is that most governments were from what is called this Concertación, which is a group of parties from the center and from the left that has ruled Chile from 1990 to until 4 years ago, most of the time, except once where the current president Sebastián Piñera was also elected. But they never changed the model. So the model still is like a neo-capitalism, which has good and bad things, right? So has increased inequality, but that's not new. It's something that is increasing the whole world. Inequality is increasing everywhere. Like when you read this, 50 people has the same wealth of half the population of Earth, and then the next year is 40 people, 30 people. So it's getting more and more uh, unfair. And I think that's the problem today. That we are growing in a very unfair society. And when you have something unfair, at some point there's a revolution. It happened in the Middle East. It happened in Chile. It happened in other countries. So I hope, and now we have a war, many wars, but this one really gets to the headline news. I hope things will change because we are not going in the right direction.
Yeah, you're talking of the Russia-Ukraine war.
Yes, yeah. There are other wars that people don't talk about, like in Yemen and other places, but there are Syria, of course. But yes, so I think we are not humans. We're still a bit like gorillas.
Yeah. So you mentioned the term hyper-capitalism. Is that like it was the Pinochet government, the Chilean government trying to push for particular sectors of the economy to grow a whole lot at the expense of other sectors?
No, I would not say that. It's more like we open everything. So basically we open all the trade. So Chile is the country that maybe has more trade agreements with other countries. Pinochet was one of the first regimes that did neoliberalism or neo-capitalism. It basically no regulation, no protectionism, open all borders, all trades. And what happens there is that if you can compete with China, you are doing well. If you cannot, you have to close, because basically this is what is happening. What happened after in many other countries, but Chile was the first one in many ways. So in some sense, Chile has been the test bed for many of these things, and they have been tried there, and some of them work, like in telecommunications, but in others have really, for example, Chile had a very good clothing industry, very good quality, but that couldn't compete with China, and it's gone, for example. So I don't think it was ever a priority, but of course, when you have a dictatorship, you can make sure that some families control the economy and ensure that many people are rich because they got the right contact at that government.
This is the Immigrant Computer Scientist podcast interview with Ricardo Baeza-Yates, faculty at Northeastern University, startup founder, and prominent industrialist. So I want to return to your timeline, and in your bachelor's and master's years, this is early 1980s, middle 1980s. Did you start to do research, and did you start to like research in those years?
I started doing research with my master, so that would be in 1984. I started to do research because of being a developing country, and because we are at the end of the world. Also, I think the system was a little bit insecure of itself. And then, for example, doing a master thesis was almost doing half a PhD. And because of that, I was the second person that finished ever the master at my university. Many people tried before, and no one could finish the thesis because we were really demanding on the thesis. For example, I published from my master thesis, I think I published 3 journal papers. This is not normal, right? In any country. So when I presented one of these results in a conference, my future advisor saw me, and he offered me a scholarship to go to Waterloo because he saw my work. He saw this is interesting, and your math, and this is a good paper, not typical for a master. And thanks of that, I didn't have to really apply to many places, so I went earlier than I expected because I went in May, not in September, because of this scholarship. So I said, no, if I have a scholarship with a person that I knew was a good advisor.
This is 1986 when you moved to Waterloo in Canada to do your PhD. Did your family also come with you at that time?
Yes, I came with my wife and 1 kid, and I had my second kid in Canada, so I have a Canadian kid.
I see.
But here I have an interesting story. I have many stories about my PhD. They are interesting. I met wonderful friends where I wrote many papers that were outside my thesis. I was in text search. I was working in the New York for English Dictionary project. At that time, it was like a single file of 560 megabytes, which was the largest file at that time of text, and didn't fit in a single CD at that time. I think it was 4 CDs, because later, when the technology improved, it could fit in one CD.
Yeah.
But for example, I have interesting memories of there, because, for example, we wrote a paper with 2 friends, Greg Rollins and Joe Culberson, one from Trinidad, the other one from Canada, about basically the cow problem. And the cow problem we didn't know was a competitive algorithm in online algorithms, but basically is what the Roomba does today to find words. So basically, we were saying how is the optimal way to find things in the plane. So it's called searching the plane, and basically it was one of the first papers on online algorithms for robots. But at that time, we didn't know that, and we call it a different way. And then maybe I have to say that sometimes the dictatorships do good things without knowing it. Is because of my memory. Again, happened the same of the military service. I forgot to renew my student visa. And then suddenly I was illegal in Canada.
In Canada, yeah.
But the Canadians were very helpful and said, look, in your case, you can go out to the US and request political asylum because of Pinochet.
Oh, wow, okay.
And then your problem is solved, because if it was my second year, if you finish in less than 2 years, you will be fine. So I went to Buffalo, I applied for political asylum, and one day I was granted that, and I came back to Canada with my family, because we all had to go out and enter the name. And thanks to that, I was able to keep doing my PhD at that time. Another nice anecdote, because I think this is also interesting, is that there was a very nice course that was called Problem Solving Seminar, which was first invented by Don Knuth in Stanford, but then very good, the dear professor, very good, did the same course in Waterloo. And basically every class will be like a faculty member in half an hour present the problem, and then will be 1 hour discussion of the problem. It was a research problem. And every student had to choose one problem for the final report. So like we had to write a short paper on one of the problems. So I chose one that I liked. It was in distributed computing, was mapping a problem to a network of computers, and I improved the algorithm that the person presented. And then when Derek saw my final report, said, well, we can publish this. This is completely new. You improve an algorithm. So we need to publish it. But the problem is that we don't know how much of the discussion that we had in that class influenced your thinking. And then in some sense, they are also a co-author.
Co-authors, yeah.
Yeah, but we were like 20, but we cannot put the 20 students as co-author. So we'll do the following. We will invent an author that will represent the course, and he will be the first author.
I see.
And then I have a paper with Paul S. Amerins, and P.S. Amerins is an anagram of problem-solving seminar. So I have a paper with an author that doesn't exist, and everyone's, and then I said I should have another paper with him. And then someone will say, oh, in 30 years, this person only have published twice. So this is another nice story.
That is such an interesting strategy to kind of consolidate everyone in the class.
Yes, I had never seen it before. So that was genius. And he was a very good teacher, and also taught me a lot of English, how to write well. And that's shown because he corrected my thesis, and then my thesis amazingly very good English because of him. He was one of the persons in my committee. Yeah. Although was not author of any of these papers, he was author of this other paper that was part of his course. I had great teachers there because I wrote 3 other papers that were not part of my thesis with 2 teachers and some friends. So it was a great environment to do research, and I learned a lot from Gaston Muret, who was my advisor, from people like Frank Tompa, Paul Larson, very good, as I mentioned.
Your political asylum that you got, was that an issue when you decided to go back to Chile after you finished your PhD in 89?
No, because nobody knew that. So this is only the Canadian government knew that. So I was just a PhD student. So I came back to university, and I guess I told people after as a joke, in the sense that that was like something good from a dictatorship. Thanks to him, I was able to finish my PhD.
But you wanted to go back. It's when you're finishing your
Always.
PhD, did you think that, well, now, especially because I have political asylum, maybe I want to stay in Canada or US, or was it?
That's a good question. So I had an offer from IBM Research to stay in Canada, to go to Toronto, but I really wanted to go back because there were only like a few PhDs in Chile, and I knew that could make a difference. So I was the second generation of PhDs in Chile. Only I had like 3-4 teachers that had a PhD, and I wanted to go back, and I think it was good because I went back with my generation had like 6-7 people that went out for PhDs, and we came back. Yeah. So basically, suddenly, the number doubled because of my generation came back, and we wanted to do that, and then I was chair very, very young, 3-4 years after the coming back, I was chair of the department. So I really wanted to push that, and I started to also help the Chilean Computer Science Society, helping organizing better conferences. So I think I made a difference at that time.
Yeah. Now, after you went back, in addition to teaching and doing research, you were also involved in startup companies and commercial ventures there. How was your ventures in e-commerce, web search engine? How were those received? Was it too early, or was it just the right time?
Yeah. So, for example, I started. I got grants right away. For example, to do search software. In '92, I with a software we created with a company and with the help of a local private foundation, we won the prize to the best software in Chile. Basically, was a desktop search for Windows 3.1 at that time, but that was in 1992. Was too early. So basically, I did desktop search too early. In '93, I applied for a large grant that had the best scores, but basically the result was your grant is so good that you should find, it will be very easy to find private funding to do this. But I was in the wrong country. This was Chile, and that was what basically was a grant to do e-commerce when the web was just starting. So just the perfect timing. So I was in the wrong place. I was not in Seattle or Silicon Valley. So and for example, then I wanted to have data from search engines, and I did a search engine for Chile that was running for 10 years, and I was able to publish maybe one of the first several papers on query analytics because I had queries and I could do research with them. Something was very hard because that data was only available for the big search engines. So and that was a small company I did to do that, and I did it with the help of some friends in Brazil, and they were bought by Google, and today that was the seed for the Google engineering in Brazil. So they have a large complex of engineering in Brazil in Belo Horizonte because of these early South American search engines.
Right. Has the tech startup scene in Chile, has it changed since the 1990s when you were trying early back then to 2010s and 2020s?
Yes, because there were some interesting programs during the last, I would say maybe 10 years. Some interesting program. I don't remember exactly now the name, but there was a program where if you're a startup and you come to Chile, you get some seed funding for your startup. So that attracted many companies to start in Chile. people from all over the world. So I know people that even stayed in Chile. So now there are people from Ireland, England, India that have come to Chile to do. It's called Chile Startup. That was the name of the program. So thanks to that, there was not too much money, but sometimes if you say I will receive $50,000 for free if I go there, not of course there are some conditions to stay in the country for some time. That attracted a lot of people, and that changed the system. And now there are some basically unicorns even in Chile.
So returning to your timeline, in 2004, 2005, you decided to move to Yahoo. Was that a conscious choice, or did that just happen by chance just because they reached out to you?
This happens by chance because really what I first did, I moved to a sabbatical in Barcelona.
I see.
But with the intention to stay there. I always loved that city. And when I was there, I started to talk to Prabhakar Ragaman, which was the head of Yahoo Labs that started in 2015.
Yeah.
And I think at the beginning we were talking about doing some research together. So maybe I would get some funding from Yahoo to do research. But at some point, and I don't remember well how, I don't have a memory. I don't know if I have emails where I could refresh that. But basically at some point he said, why you help me to open a lab in London? And I said, European lab. I said, okay, but I want to open it in Barcelona. And I convinced him and also above him why it was much better Barcelona, because it was cheaper, because it was easier to attract people from many more places, better weather, a lot of things. And I did that. So basically in 2 years I had a lab with like 20-something researchers, a lot of postdocs, a lot of interns. We got up to 60 in the 10 years that the lab was there. Right. So it was a great time. I mean, it was maybe one of my best times, basically running a lab. And then we started one in Israel. So for the first 5 years, I was the person running the lab in Israel because of close proximity. Then Joel Marek took that. Also, when there was a kind of problems at Yahoo, I also had to even run for a little time India, in Bangalore, and I had to create the London one, and I was running also a small one in Chile for Latin America. So, and I had a group in San Francisco too at some point. So I was I was managing people in more than 100 people in 6 places in the world.
Yeah, you were again kind of pushing yourself to the extreme, to the limit.
Well, I like geography and I like distribution, so.
These places have very different work cultures: Silicon Valley, Barcelona, London, and then Haifa in India. Did you have a favorite work culture among them that you say, oh, that's something that is really, really unique?
I think the work culture in south of Europe and Israel is the same. It's the Mediterranean culture. So I think that would be my favorite. But I try to always to adapt to the culture. So I prefer to learn and adapt. So I think I can do it in many different places. Because of, I told you before, I like geography. Yeah. Maybe everything what I have been doing is just to travel. Because I love to travel. So I have been in 85 countries and I want to be in 100 before I die. So this is my goal. My next goal is to be in 100 countries and more than half the countries. And to have a glimpse of this amazing world where we live.
The Mediterranean culture, why would you say that you really like that?
One is because it's a relaxed country, so it's a relaxed culture. So basically you work to live, you don't live to work. I would say. And also Barcelona has this interesting duality that is a cosmopolitan city, so it's a very international city, but in some sense with a provincial life. So you can live in downtown Barcelona and still your baker, you know your bakery, your coffee place, your newsstand. So still you are living like in a small neighborhood, but you are in a very cosmopolitan city. So you have the best of two worlds. I think that's what I like.
You're listening to the interview with Ricardo Baeza-Yates, faculty at Northeastern University, startup founder, and prominent industrialist. This is the Immigrant Computer Scientist podcast. Coming to the last segment of our interview, retrospective and perspective, I wanted to start by asking, how do you stay happy outside of work? Are there other things you do beyond work to keep yourself relaxed and happy?
Yeah, well, I don't plan much. So I think plans are something that limit yourself. So I try to take the opportunity so I can, and also in developing countries you learn how to improvise very well. So something that in a developed country they cannot do, like improvising, like in India or in Chile they can do an event and nobody will know that they started the day earlier. So it's like looks like was very well planned, but really was just improvisation. But we learn how to do this thing. So I improvise a lot, I guess. I like to be with friends. I like good food, good wine because I'm from Chile. So I like to travel to see the world. I like to read. Also, we are lucky that we do things that we work on things that we like. So we shouldn't call that work because you are getting paid for things you like. So that's, I think that's plenty to be happy. So you have to do things that you don't like, but if you add up, I think most of the time you're doing things you like. So you are connected not because you are addicted, because you like it. Although it's very hard to see the difference sometimes. So you need to be very conscious about that. And the last years I've been working a lot on bias and responsible AI. So also that helped me an awareness of other things, learning about other things. I guess I like to learn all the time. So that's part of being a researcher. You need to be learning. And I love to learn about other fields too, not only computer science.
I want to ask about mentors and role models. You've mentioned a few of them. Are there significant mentors and role models in your life that stand out as having influenced your life and your career?
I would say that my two first mentors were my grandfather and this director of this small school, Winifred. I don't remember now her surname, but I think these two were like my two first mentors. Then at high school, I had some very good teachers of math and physics, and I think that reinforced the science part. So then at university, I would say that I had also very very good teachers like Patricio Poblete, which was my master advisor, René Nobile, which was the master advisor for electrical engineering, that was on the electrical engineering side. Other computer science professors that I think influenced me were Jorge Olivos, Alfredo Piquer, which they were early PhDs in Chile. I may miss someone, but I think these are the most important. And then in Waterloo, main advisor Gaston Gonnet. Gaston Gonnet is the one that, for example, is behind the Maple Symbolic, one of the founders of the Maple Symbolic Algebra System, one of the founders of OpenText, which is a very large company now. The new offering English Dictionary project was a great project to work with text. And then we had people like, I mentioned, like Derry Wood, Paul Larson. I think they taught me, for example, with Paul Larson, I wrote another paper based on the final assignment for his course. And he also said, what you have done is completely new, and let's write the paper together. So I don't know if that's usual, but with two assignments in two courses, I had two papers. They helped me on the publishing game. So having these other people that will tell me how to write papers, I think was very good. And when I came back to Chile, that's why I went up very fast, because I went with like 10 papers from my thesis and other papers, and then I published a lot of results in journals, so I had a lot of papers very early. There, I think we had this crazy idea with one of my Brazilian friends to write a book on information retrieval.
Right. Yes.
That was in the late 90s.
Right.
And who thought that would have become the most cited and used book after? So 2,000 Americans.
How did that come about? How did that book project come about?
Yeah, so this was like almost like a joke. I was visiting Brazil, and he said to me, there's no good book about IR. So this was an old one from Salton, one of the founders of IR. So it's no really good book on IRs. And I don't know who said it first. Someone said, I don't know if it was him or me, it said, let's write a book together, like a joke. Let's write a book together. And he said, yes, but we don't know all the topics, but we can invite people. So this was what's interesting was not an edited book. Mm-hmm. We wrote a big part of it, but for some chapters we asked other people to write it because they were the experts on that chapter.
I see.
But we told them what's the content that we wanted. So we decided the content. We want a book a chapter that has this. You can put more if you want, but please add this. So the book has a nicer structure, everything is a book. It's not a collection of chapters. It's a book where it was like a Web 2.0. Many people collaborated, but the two main authors were Bertia Ribeiro Neto and myself. And we repeated that in the second edition, went from 550 pages to more than 1,000, and we had to change the format to reduce it a little bit. And with more chapters and more collaborators, and we wrote even more of the book there. We wrote more than half the book.
I want to ask about your philosophy for handling failures and rejections. In computer science, we get used to not just having papers rejected, but also having ideas rejected if you're in industry, or having proposals rejected if you're in academia. Do you have a philosophy for handling failures and rejections?
I would say that these are part of the game, so you need to embrace failures, and also I think you need to embrace uncertainty. That's something that people have a hard time to do, embracing uncertainty. I almost love uncertainty. I love that when I don't know. I think that's like a challenge. And one thing, I think the most important thing is to believe in yourself, to believe in what you're doing. So I have a nice story about that. We at some point at Yahoo Labs, we decided, I decided I wanted to do like a new distributed search architecture. Said in the future we cannot have these large centralized architectures, even if it is like in parallel. Still there are local networks, and the best will be to crawl in every country, so you have like many places to crawl and then to index there, and then all local queries are answered in the local country and so on. So we started that, and we found so the idea was, okay, let's do exactly what the search engine can do today, but we can do it cheaper because it's distributed. That was the idea. And we worked many years about that because there are so many components. And finally, we had a paper that had a prototype running in 4 different countries, where we showed that basically we could do it like 20% cheaper, achieving the same results. Well, we sent it to the main conference, like SIGIR, we had 3 rejections. In one of them was 3 accepts. We strong accepts, and then the meta reviewer put it down. And one of the complaints was there's no comparison with other systems. And of course, it was new. There was no other system like this. And after 3 rejections, my co-authors said, okay, this is not good. Let's forget about it. I said, no, this is good. Someone will recognize it. And then we sent it to CIKM, which is a little bit less than the other conference. And they got the best paper award. So if the story teaches something, says, if you think it's good, you have to be insist and be resilient. So I think resilience is something that is very important.
Sort of relatedly, I want to ask about imposter syndrome. This is a phenomenon that computer scientists sometimes face, in particular women, but not just women, a lot of others face too, where sometimes we feel like we don't belong in the community, the computing community. Is that something that you ever experienced, or how do you advise people handle the imposter syndrome?
I think I experienced that earlier. So I think I experienced that my first years of university, when I was looking for my limits. I wasn't sure about that, and there are many ways that you feel that you are doing better than you should. And many times it's just your own mind that is playing this trick. So I think I learned, trying to find your limits, I learned to be more secure of myself. And I think that it's very hard to have recipes. I think every person is completely different. But I would say that it's just practice. I think you need to practice this, like Like be very aware. Like, okay, I'm feeling this, but maybe it's not true. For example, when I was the first year at university, and this is another story that has a more recent, I was also playing chess. I wanted to play chess even professionally. So for 3 months, I was playing 6 hours of chess almost every day.
Wow, that's a lot. Yeah.
And then at some point said, okay, and I became the second best in my university.
Wow.
Okay, the champion went to be an international master, and now he lives in Netherlands. And I always thought that I was second only because I was lucky in the fixture. So basically, I was lucky, and I lost only with the champion because I was lucky and I was managed to win the other games. Because when I was playing fast, I was not so good. But then after 3 months, I decided that I had to choose between living or chess. So I thought, okay, I said life. And only like less than a year ago, a friend says, "Why we don't play chess?" And I started to play chess. And then I guess I remember why I like so much chess, because I really love to play chess. I started to play online.
Yeah.
And playing online, I find out that I'm much better when I have time to think, rather than playing fast. So I have my elo is like 300 points more.
Higher, yeah.
If I play with 10 minutes, give me 10 minutes per move, that's fine. But when you have 10 minutes for the whole game, I'm not that good. The tricky people put me a trap, and I don't see it, and then I lose. So basically, when I was 18, I felt that this imposter syndrome in chess. I felt that I was doing better than I was. But today, now, more than 30 years later, I find out that really is just a different dimension. So I would say that this is something important. Like there's so many factors, and many times you are not thinking in what's the right factor. It's not you. It's some factor that affects this.
That's so beautiful.
But I would say, going back to another question, I would say just do it. So this is my main motto: just do it, because sometimes it doesn't matter if you're shy, it doesn't matter if you feel afraid, it doesn't matter if you think you cannot do it. If you don't do it, you will never know. So you need to do it. So you need to try it, and try more than once.
So just do the next right thing and things will follow.
Yes, and also follow the path that is the best opportunity. Because if you plan too much, you will say, "Oh, this is not in my plan," but your plan is limiting you. It's basically cutting many roads that you can follow. That's why I think people shouldn't do plans. And if they do plans, they have to be like long term. And then if you do 10%, you do a lot.
Yeah.
For me, a very good example is, I'm sure Obama never planned to be president of the U.S. Like a black kid in Hawaii, single mother, African father with a Muslim name. Come on, you cannot plan that. But he followed the path. I haven't read his biography, but I'm sure he followed the path to realize at some point that he could be president. But he never thought about that. Doesn't make any sense. Yeah. And if he thought about that, well, he's a genius.
Yeah. So I have 2 more questions for you. My next question is about diversity. You're a pretty big proponent of diversity in computing. About 50% of your PhD students have been women. As you said, you grew up with women around you, your mom and your 3 sisters. Can you say how we in the community can grow the percentage of women and achieve parity, just based on your experiences, since you have had so much success recruiting and working with women?
So one of my sisters sadly died a few years ago of cancer. So she died only at 54. So that was a very big loss. So yeah, this year, one of my students will graduate, and then we'll have exactly 50-50. 32 PhD students, 16 women, 16 men. So that was on purpose. So basically, at the beginning, I had mostly men, and I realized that if you want to do something, everyone has to do something. So I did that on purpose. I tried to convince some women to study with me. And then what happened is that women talk to women. So more women were requesting to work with me. So before I had to do some affirmative action, and now what's the opposite. And now what I try to do is to keep this balance. Or if I have more women, that would be fine with me. I think every person is a world. Every person has different. For example, I had two PhD students, women that have dyslexia, and with them we have done wonderful work on how to use technology to help people with dyslexia.
Very nice.
And although your original topic was not that one, when I had my first student said, "Why we don't work on that? You know the problem. You have suffered the problem.
Yeah.
No one else will do better than you."
Yeah.
And she's now one of the world experts on technology and dyslexia.
Wow.
And the second one is also now in Germany. One is Spanish and German. Is doing very well in Germany, early career on that. So sometimes you need to think also on what is the potential of each person. But for example, I had other people that didn't want to do a PhD, and I convinced them to do a PhD. For example, Carlos Castillo, which is now a full professor in Barcelona, because I saw the potential, and he has been very successful.
So what do you say to someone who you see potential in to be a great researcher, but they don't want to do research? What do you say to convince them?
No, I think you have to try to seduce them with what is the possible future, but you cannot force them.
Yeah.
So I had other cases where the person said, "No, I want to work in industry," and so on. Yeah, I think also I try to have not only women, but for example, a lot of people from developing countries.
Right.
So there are enough people that are basically helping the major powers. But for example, a lot of Latin Americans. I had people from Pakistan, people from Turkey. So basically, try to help people in many different places in the world. So not only one type of people.
Yeah.
And also, I think I have mentored a lot of postdocs that are now very successful. When I was at Yahoo Labs, we had people from more than 20 different countries, and I think I helped them to become better researchers, and now they're in the top companies in the world, or the main universities in the world.
I want to ask a hypothetical question. So you grew up mostly in Chile, and then you've spent a lot of your time later in different countries. So you have kind of sampled these countries a lot. I want to ask, in a parallel world, if you had not grown up in Chile, but you'd been the same person, all else being equal, family being equal, but suppose you had grown up in Canada or maybe even in the US, do you think your life and your career choices may have been the same, or would they have been different? Again, it's a hypothetical question.
Interesting question. Never thought about it. At first, I think maybe the choices would have been the same, but I would say that many things in my life would have been much easier. For example, research funding in Chile in my first years was not like being in the US or Canada. So I would say that maybe my career could have been faster if I were in a developed country because of availability of resources. Although you compete with more people, so you never know.
Yeah.
You never know if you are the tail of the lion or the head of the lion,
right?
And that changes with the context.
Right.
So it's very hard to say, but I would say that maybe many things would have been the same. Something for sure, if you asked me 30 years ago where I would be today, I would have never guessed. So I would have never thought about many things I've done, just because I saw the opportunity and I took it.
Right.
Not only living in Spain or Canada, but also have been my sabbaticals partly in Australia, New Zealand, and now in the US. So yes, I have this sample of living in different places, and also, as I said, being in 85 different countries shows you the diversity, the contrast. I love to learn also when I go to a place and I don't know things. So I'm asking things all the time, and sometimes I ask silly questions. Other times I ask questions that people say, "Well, I never thought about that," and I may not know the answer. Like, for example, relations of semantics of geographical names with history and so on, because I like geography and history.
Yeah. My last question, is there anything else that we didn't cover that you wanted to talk about?
Sometimes the capitalism forgets that we are a tribe. We are still the same as 30,000 years ago, 40,000 years ago. Evolution is nothing. So we need to think more about the tribe, especially in these times where we have bad things happening all over the world.
Oh, that's so beautifully put. That's such a beautiful way to end our conversation. Thank you, Ricardo, for coming on this podcast and for being so open and willing to share your journey, your experiences, and your wisdom with us. Thank you. Gracias.
No, thank you, Indy, because this was an amazing opportunity. I never had the chance to tell all these things in a single way.
Thank you. This was episode 35 of the Immigrant Computer Scientists podcast. You have heard the immigration story of Ricardo Baeza-Yates, faculty at Northeastern University, and who has led multiple Yahoo research labs in the past, and who has founded and worked in multiple companies across 4 continents: South America, Europe, Asia, and North America, and his story of growing up in Chile in South America. If you like this episode, you may also enjoy our immediately preceding episode, that's episode 34, where we visited Mexico. And you may also like episodes 5, 6, 7, and 8 in season 1 of this podcast, where we visited Brazil and interviewed 3 prominent computer scientists who are currently in the US. Coming up next week, we have the season finale of season 2 of the Immigrant Computer Scientists podcast. Stay tuned. As usual, you can find all episodes and detailed episode guides on our website, csimmigrant.org. Again, that's csimmigrant.org. And you can find us and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and basically wherever you get your podcasts. All the music used in episodes of the Immigrant Computer Scientists podcast is royalty-free. All voice recordings were performed with and are reproduced with full consent of narrators and participants. You can find music credits on our website. Join the online discussion about this podcast on all major social media, including Twitter and Facebook, with the handle CSImmigrant and hashtag CSImmigrant. And of course, the episode guide is available at our website, csimmigrant.org. This is the Immigrant Computer Scientists podcast.